Have you ever felt like you think too much? Like your mind refuses to rest? Constantly analyzing, questioning, breaking down every detail of life while the world around you seems fine living on the surface? You notice things others don't. The silence in people's tone, the weight behind their words, the meaning behind a passing glance. You think deeply, feel deeply, and sometimes it feels more like a curse than a gift. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But what if that privilege feels like a burden? What if your mind, the same one that seeks truth, is also the reason you feel detached, restless, and misunderstood? Jung believed that deep thinkers are not born. They're forged through suffering, introspection, and solitude. They are the ones who cannot stop looking beneath the mask of life. And that constant search rewires the brain itself. Because once your mind learns to go deeper, you can never go back to living shallow. But here's the paradox. The more you understand the world, the harder it becomes to belong to it. The more you know yourself, the lonelier you might feel. So the real question is, how do you survive being a deep thinker in a shallow world? And even more, how do you turn this overwhelming depth into strength, clarity, and purpose? Carl Jung's psychology holds the key.
He called it individuation, the lifelong process of becoming your true self by integrating every hidden part of your psyche. But this path isn't peaceful. It's not about positive thinking or pretending to be calm. It's about confronting the chaos that exists inside you, the unconscious. Jung said that most people live their entire lives never meeting their true selves.
They wear masks, personas, just to fit in, survive, or be loved. But deep thinkers? They can't hide from themselves for long. Their minds demand truth, even when it hurts. Think of your mind like an ocean. Most people stay on the surface, distracted by the waves. But deep thinkers dive beneath, and what they find there isn't always beautiful. It's raw, uncomfortable, and real. The deeper you go, the more you realize. Your thoughts, fears, and desires are not random. They're ancient, archetypal. Jung believed every mind is connected to something larger, the collective unconscious. It is a vast psychological field of symbols and instincts that humanity has shared since the beginning of time. That's why certain stories, dreams, or symbols feel so personal, yet universal. When you dream of falling, or being chased, or finding a door that won't open, those aren't just private images. They're messages from that deeper layer of the psyche. Jung believed that deep thinkers are constantly in touch with this realm, even if they do not realize it. That is why their minds never stop, because they're reprocessing not just their own experience, but the collective patterns of humanity itself. But that kind of depth can be overwhelming. It is why deep thinkers often feel alienated, as if they live in a world that doesn't speak their language. They crave meaning, while others crave distraction. They seek truth, while others seek comfort. And yet, this depth, if understood, becomes their greatest power. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." That means most people are not thinking. They're being thought by their unconscious mind, their emotions, reactions, relationships, all driven by hidden fears and unresolved wounds. But deep thinkers? They have the rare ability to observe these patterns. They question their own motives, trace emotions to their roots, and confront their shadows, those parts of the self that society teaches us to hide. This confrontation is what rewires the mind. When you begin to see your inner world clearly, your anger, shame, fear, and longing, something shifts. You stop being controlled by them. You begin to choose. You begin to think with awareness, not reaction. That's the birth of consciousness, the very thing Jung devoted his life to understanding. Because to him, the goal of psychology wasn't to be happy, it was to become whole. So if you've ever been told you think too much, remember, you're not broken. You're awakening. You're doing what few people dare to do. face yourself. And that journey, painful as it is how you evolve from a thinker into a visionary. The greatest paradox of being a deep thinker is this. You see everything, but you can't unsee it. You notice people's contradictions, their masks, their unspoken pain. You sense when someone's lying, not just to you, but to themselves. You read between every line, and sometimes you wish you couldn't. Because awareness, as Jung would say, is a double-edged sword. It frees you, but it also isolates you. You start seeing through illusions that others still believe in. The social games, the fake smiles, the empty goals, all of it begins to lose its meaning. You can't fake excitement about things that feel hollow anymore, and that's when loneliness sets in. Not because you're truly alone, but because you've stepped outside of the illusion that most people live in. Carl Jung once wrote, "Loneliness does not come from having no people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. And that's the curse of the deep mind. You crave truth, yet truth makes you distant. Most people chase pleasure, but deep thinkers chase meaning. And meaning, real meaning, is rarely found in comfort. It's found in questioning everything. You start asking, why do people act this way? Why do I repeat the same patterns? Why does happiness feel temporary, even when I have everything? You begin peeling back layers of your own mind, and what you discover often shocks you. Hidden motives, suppressed memories, emotions you thought were gone. Jung called this the shadow. The shadow is everything within you that you've rejected, denied, or buried. Your jealousy, your insecurity, your rage, your lust, your need to be seen. All of it lives in that dark corner of your psyche. Deep thinkers, unlike most, can't keep the shadow hidden. Their awareness forces them to confront it. And here's where the pain begins, but also where the transformation starts. Because the shadow isn't evil. It's misunderstood. It holds all the raw energy you've been suppressing. Jung believed that your power, creativity, and authenticity live in the very parts of yourself you're most ashamed of. The moment you face your shadow, you reclaim your strength. That's why Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Enlightenment, in Jung's view, isn't some mystical escape from pain. It's integration, accepting your darkness instead of fighting it. Deep thinkers naturally move toward this process because their minds can't settle for lies. They have to know the truth, even if it hurts. Let's pause here for a moment. Think about the times you've been overwhelmed by your thoughts, when your mind kept spinning, searching for clarity. What were you really seeking? Not peace, not distraction. You were seeking truth. You wanted to understand yourself, others, life itself. That's what Jung called the drive toward individuation, the inner force that pushes us to evolve beyond the mask, beyond the ego, beyond the illusion of who we think we are. But this process comes with suffering. It dismantles false identities. It forces you to meet the real you beneath every label you've worn. Most people never reach this stage because it's terrifying. To confront yourself means to let go of who you pretended to be. But for the deep thinker, that confrontation isn't optional. It's destiny. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." Awareness hurts because it exposes the lies we've told ourselves. But it also heals, because truth, once faced, sets you free. Deep thinkers often experience this as a breakdown, a point when everything familiar starts falling apart. They question their beliefs, relationships, ambitions, and even their identity. It feels like chaos. But Jung would say, that's exactly how transformation begins. The old self must collapse so a more authentic one can emerge. You can't rewire your brain for clarity without first breaking the illusions that kept you blind. And that's the hidden gift of deep thinking. It's not overthinking. It's inner excavation. You're not broken for feeling too much. You're simply in the process of becoming. But to survive this process, Jung says, you must do one thing, Stop identifying with the storm. Your thoughts, emotions, and fears, they're not who you are. They're waves passing through the ocean of your mind. If you can learn to observe without attachment, to feel deeply without drowning, you discover the stillness underneath it all. That stillness is your true self. So yes, awareness makes life heavier, but it also makes it meaningful. Because once you've seen the truth, even if it breaks you, you can never again live a lie. And that's how the deep mind begins its awakening, through the courage to see, even when it hurts. There's a moment in every deep thinker's life when they realize something crucial. Thinking alone isn't enough. You can analyze forever, question everything, and still feel stuck. That's because thoughts, if left unchecked, become traps. You start building mental mazes instead of pathways. Jung understood this better than anyone. He said that overanalysis isn't a sign of intelligence. It's a symptom of disconnection. See, when your mind never stops, it's not wisdom speaking. It's your fear of stillness. Deep thinkers often live in their heads because the inner world feels safer than the outer one. Out there, things are uncertain, chaotic, emotional. Inside the mind, everything seems controllable. But here's the paradox. The more you retreat into thought, the less control you actually have. Carl Jung believed that the goal of self-awareness isn't to think more, it's to feel more consciously. Because emotions are the bridge between your conscious and unconscious mind. When you suppress feelings, they don't disappear, they sink deeper into dreams, behaviors, impulses, and anxiety. Jung called this the return of the repressed. Whatever you refuse to feel will eventually surface, not as emotion, but as confusion. So how do you rewire this loop? How do you stop drowning in your thoughts and start using them as fuel for growth? Jung's answer was integration. You have to unite your intellect with your intuition. Let's break that down. Your intellect is the voice that reasons. It seeks logic, structure, clarity. Your intuition is the voice that knows. It speaks through subtle hunches, symbols, and emotions. Deep thinkers tend to trust the intellect more, but Jung argued that both must coexist. Because logic without intuition becomes sterile, and intuition without logic becomes chaos. When your mind and intuition begin to cooperate, something magical happens. Clarity emerges. Jung often spoke of active imagination, a technique he used to communicate with his unconscious. Instead of suppressing thoughts and emotions, he would visualize them as images or characters and dialogue with them. It wasn't fantasy, it was psychological exploration. Imagine this. You're overwhelmed by anxiety. Instead of labeling it bad, Jung would tell you to visualize it. What does it look like? How does it speak? What is it trying to tell you? Suddenly, your fear becomes a messenger instead of an enemy. This is how you turn thought into power, by translating confusion into communication. Every emotion carries information. Every fear hides a desire. Every obsession points towards something unresolved within you. Deep thinkers who learn to listen instead of suppress become their own therapists. Their overthinking transforms into awareness. But here's the catch. You can't rush this process. You have to be brutally honest with yourself. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." Most people are puppets of their unconscious drives. They repeat patterns, attract the same people, make the same mistakes, and call it bad luck. Deep thinkers, however, have the unique ability to see those patterns. And when you see a pattern clearly, you can break it. That's where rewiring the brain begins, not through external control, but through internal observation. Let's make this real for a second. Think about the last time you spiraled into overthinking, maybe about a relationship, a decision, your purpose. Beneath that loop, there was always a feeling you didn't want to face. Fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of failure. The mind keeps spinning, not because it loves to think, but because it's avoiding feeling. Once you stop running and face the raw emotion underneath, boom, the loop collapses. Your thoughts finally have nothing to protect. That's how the brain rewires. Awareness dissolves resistance. And as your awareness deepens, something else shifts. Your creativity awakens. Because the same mind that once trapped you in overthinking is the same mind that can generate profound insight, art, and understanding. Carl Jung believed that creativity is not a hobby, it's a necessity. It's how the unconscious expresses what words cannot. That's why his therapy encouraged writing, painting, and even dream journaling. When you create, you give your inner world a language. And once the inner world finds expression, the noise quiets. You stop fighting your mind and start flowing with it. This is where deep thinkers become powerful. They're no longer victims of their minds, they're co-creators with them. Because true intelligence isn't the ability to think fast, it is the ability to think consciously. It's knowing when to analyze and when to surrender, when to question and when to simply be. In the modern world, where everyone's mind is overloaded with information, Jung's message is more relevant than ever. Stop filling your head. Start feeling your life. Once you do, thinking becomes a tool, not a trap. You begin to see clearly, act deliberately, and live authentically. And that's the real secret behind the psychology of deep thinkers. They don't silence their minds. They understand them. Every deep thinker eventually reaches a breaking point. That moment when their own thoughts become too loud, too heavy, too endless. You start to wonder, will I ever stop analyzing everything? But here's the truth Jung discovered. You don't need to silence your mind. You need to transform your relationship with it. Because your thoughts aren't your enemy. They're your teachers. They're trying to show you the patterns you've ignored, the fears you've buried, the truths you've refused to face. Jung called this process individuation, the path to becoming your whole self. It's not about being positive or enlightened. It's about being real, about meeting every part of you, the confident, the broken, the wise, the lost, and saying, I see you, you belong. That's what separates surface-level thinkers from deep thinkers. Most people chase peace by escaping their inner world. Deep thinkers, however, enter it, fully, courageously, until chaos turns into clarity. But individuation isn't easy. It demands one thing above all, radical self-honesty. You have to look at yourself without filters, not the person you pretend to be, but the one you truly are when no one's watching. That means confronting your shadow, the hidden desires, insecurities, and impulses you've spent years denying. And here's the paradox Jung revealed. The more you suppress your darkness, the more it controls you. But when you bring it to light, you integrate it, and in that moment, it loses its power to dominate. Integration doesn't make you pure. It makes you whole. It's the reason Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Let's make that real. Imagine someone who's deeply insecure but masks it with arrogance. They don't know their pride is a defense mechanism. It is their shadow at work. But the moment they see it, truly see it, something profound happens. They stop needing to prove anything. They stop comparing, competing, overcompensating. Awareness dissolves the ego's illusion. That's the awakening of the integrated mind, where self-awareness replaces self-deception. And when this happens, something shifts deep within you. Your energy becomes grounded. Your mind becomes quiet. You stop chasing meaning. Because you become meaning. You realize that every struggle, every obsession, every sleepless night of overthinking was never a curse. It was a conversation. A dialogue between your conscious self and your unconscious trying to say, hey, look here. There's something you've forgotten about yourself. And when you finally listen, the chaos transforms into coherence. You no longer drown in your thoughts. You direct them. You no longer fear your emotions. You read them. You no longer seek validation, because you know who you are. That's when you experience what Jung called psychic wholeness. It's not about perfection. It's about inner alignment. You become someone whose thoughts, emotions, and actions all flow in the same direction: truth. But here's the twist. This transformation doesn't make you invincible. It makes you real. And being real means being vulnerable, open, and fully alive. The integrated mind doesn't build walls, it builds bridges. You stop judging others because you've seen the same darkness in yourself. You stop resenting pain because you know it's what made you conscious. Jung's psychology isn't about escaping the human condition. It is about embracing it so completely that it turns into art. Because the moment you stop running from yourself, you become magnetic. People feel your authenticity. They sense your depth. They trust your silence more than others' noise. You no longer just think deeply. You live deeply. That's the true power of a deep thinker. Not to overanalyze life, but to understand it from the inside out. So how do you know when you've reached this point? When your thoughts stop being a battlefield and start becoming a symphony. When solitude feels nourishing, not lonely. When you can sit in silence and feel full instead of empty. That's the mind Jung wanted humanity to awaken to, a mind that doesn't fear its own depths. Because ultimately, you don't control your mind by suppressing thoughts. You control it by integrating them, by knowing which voice comes from fear, which comes from truth, and which one deserves to guide you forward. And when you master that, when you become the observer, not the prisoner of your mind, you stop surviving life and start creating it. That is the transformation every deep thinker is destined for, to evolve from a thinker into a creator, from an observer into a participant, from a seeker into a sage. So, if you're watching this, and you've ever felt like your mind is too heavy, too busy, too deep, remember this. You're not broken, you're just awakening. You're not lost, you're exploring. And you're not overthinking. You're preparing to see what most people never will, your own truth. Because the moment you understand your mind, you unlock your soul. And when you unlock your soul, the entire universe begins to unfold from within you. So keep thinking deeply, but think consciously. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Because your journey into the mind is just beginning. And together, we're learning how to turn thought into power and awareness into freedom.